everyone. My name's Shauna Cole, and welcome to Diverse Voices. I'm joined this morning with Zenaib Kahera, and we are going to be chatting about all things when it comes to job search, with a focus on interviewing techniques. So this is part of a weekly series designed to amplify diverse voices to support underrepresented job seekers and recruiters in their journey to create more inclusive workplaces. So, Zenaib, thanks so much for being here this morning. You want to share a little bit about yourself and your professional background?
Yes. So, hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Zenaib Kahera. I am a career competence coach. And I've been career coaching for the last 7 years. And what brought me to this work is just I know how much our jobs play an impact in our day-to-day lives. It's how we make a living. And I feel like everyone has the ability to have a job that brings them fulfillment, mentally, emotionally, even physically. And so a lot of the clients that I work with seek that, but they lack in the level of confidence in order to pursue it. So my mission is to help individuals find that confidence. And the mass majority of the clients I work with are women and women of color. So nice to meet everyone.
Well, thanks for that. And you recently got some recognition and some awards. What did you get?
I was thinking about that last night as I was reading through my bio.
Yeah.
I was just like, wow, this is so cool. So Influence Digest every year produces a list of the top 15 coaches in various cities. They have one, I believe, for Vancouver, Toronto, and I have one for Montreal. And in 2023, I was on the list for the top 15 coaches in Montreal. So that was a pretty remarkable recognition for me there.
Amazing. Well, congratulations on that. And when
Thank
you work with
you.
clients, I mean, to be on any list like that, I'm just like, yes, we'll take it, right? That's amazing.
Yeah, because I just put my head down and I just get to work in, so it's good to be recognized. So.
Amazing. And do you work with clients like primarily in Montreal, or do you do remote work as well?
My client base is predominantly US. It's probably actually in the last year, it's moved significantly up Canada based. So I would say it's about 55-45 more Canada now. I used to be predominantly US because I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. So, but I've been in Canada for 10 years, so 9 exactly.
You still have some connections,
Yeah, I still have, and my work is all virtual, so it's remote and virtual. So that allows me to help people actually all over the world. I have clients in Europe and even in Qatar, and so it's pretty cool work.
Wow, that sounds. I mean, that's pretty diverse, like in terms of where they're located, and so all the services you offer, you can do online. Amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, do you find too? I feel like after COVID, like there's so much more of an acceptance from people, like, and clients to do remote work versus like having an in-person relationship with a coach.
Yes.
Like it's so much more accepted and normalized now, right? So you said you work primarily with women of color, I don't know. I'm thinking that women of color might face some unique challenges in their job search. Yeah. What are some of the top challenges that you would see women of color facing in their job search?
Yeah, can you hear me, by the way? I know we're live, but my mic said it. Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure that it switched to my headphones. So hold on 1 second, folks.
Yeah.
This is how we experience technology in the real world.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good? We're good? Okay.
You're good.
So, can you ask that question one more time? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it was around. So you said you work primarily with women of color. What are some of the like top challenges that you see women of color facing in their job search?
So I think part of one of the major issues is navigating um, a system that really isn't designed for our progression. It isn't that we are invited into this space, but we're not always welcomed as we are,
Mm,
like authentically.
hmm
So, you know, um, specifically in the Black community, there's this idea of like code switching. All
mm,
types of ethnicities do it, but specifically Black people, we've kind of put a term to it, and that can be exhausting.
hmm
And then also, it's a lot of trusting. How do I explain this? Second guessing themselves and not questioning, like, am I just being dramatic, or is
mm,
like, are they really kind of gaslighting me in terms of my talents and my progression, right?
hmm
So that can kill someone's confidence because they never feel like they're safe and secure in the decisions that they make in their career, because they're trying to navigate, is this happening? Is there any issues that I'm happening because of how I look, how I talk? Or is it like, something that I'm actually doing wrong? So it's really just not really feeling secure in who they are as an individual
hmm
because of the environments that they have to work in.
Yeah, I watched a talk recently on imposter syndrome
Mm-hmm.
and how how that can have such an impact on how we navigate our careers and how it can have such an impact on what we feel like we're able to contribute or entitled to, right? So this whole notion of imposter syndrome seems like it could really take a toll on our overall progression and happiness and ability to like advocate for ourselves as well. What do you think of that concept?
Yeah, and what's interesting with imposter syndrome, because I also recently did a presentation on it when I was researching it, it was initially the individuals who were studied for it were white women in
Mm,
like the 70s ish. And so there's a lot of dynamics in that, right? Because you're coming out of this, it's kind of like the beginning of the feminist movement,
mhm,
right? You see more women entering the workforce, right? So a lot of the issues that they dealt with were because it was a huge cultural shift, and they weren't really accepted into the workforce still, right?
yeah.
But with that being said, the the people they were studying again were white women. So,
Mhm,
when you think about being a woman of color, there's even more dynamics for that.
yeah.
So there's been some dialogue about, is imposter syndrome something that, not that we can't experience it, but how does it show up for women of color? Because this whole concept is like, whether or not we're questioning ourselves, right? We feel like we're an imposter, but there's a system there that doesn't really welcome us as we
Mm,
are,
yeah.
So it's not always the self-deprecating thoughts
Yeah.
that we experience. Sometimes it's literally, you know, working in spaces where there's microaggression,
Yeah.
or you're the only person that looks like you in a room,
Mm,
right? So it's imposter syndrome is quite an interesting concept in itself, but I'm not trying to devalue it in terms of its
yeah.
existence. I just think that um, as women of color, we have to be careful, or people of color, we have to be
Yeah.
careful about saying, "Oh, it's just me."
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like, cause it's like, oh, I have to go do this self work and this self discovery and like work on my confidence and I need to be more secure in my brand, et cetera, et cetera. And to your point, it's like, do you, or is this like,
Yeah.
yeah, like an external thing, like coming at you. Right.
And I'm
So
not
it's a
trying
good
to
point.
promote this like
Yeah.
victim mentality. It's not that. It just has to be a
Yeah.
balance. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
self evaluation is a good thing, but it shouldn't become a burden and a hardship because
Yeah.
you're doing it so much and you're not really giving yourself grace,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, it's so true. You know what? Like there's definitely like a lot to unpack, like in terms of the complexity, especially for people who are from like for real marginalized groups who are for real
Yes.
experiencing stuff that can contribute to those feelings in a very real way. That's no matter how much inner work you do, that
Yeah.
is still going to be there, unfortunately.
Mhm.
So when it comes to receiving like fair consideration, um, what advice would you offer candidates to make sure that they're getting that fair consideration in the interview process, especially when they could be facing potential bias as a person of color?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is, and this is really more personal philosophy, although I feel like I'm not the only one who feels this way. It's not your responsibility to make sure that an
Hmm.
organization is unbiased in their hiring processes.
Yep.
So the way that we approach it then is doing our research as best as we can about the company. But if you do find that there are some biases in their practices, it's disappointing, but it's also a blessing in disguise because it lets you know, hey, this is not going to be the space for me, you
Yeah.
know? And when I mention research, a lot of times people think networking is just so you can get an in so you can get a job. Networking also
Mhm.
helps you figure out, is this company going to be the right space for you?
Yeah.
So talking to people who work there, talking to people of color who work there and asking them like, what's your genuine experience? How has it been? Not everybody will be open to the idea of sharing
Yeah. Yeah.
negative aspects, but um, I don't think that it is a detriment to ask. And there's obviously ways that you can ask, like, how do you feel like the organization has been embracing diversity? Or what do you feel like are some things that they are still working on that you feel
Mm,
hopeful about, but you feel like are opportunities, right? So framing the question in a way where you're not implying that you're looking for dirt, if that makes
yeah.
sense. And then also I like to look at public statements from CEOs, any type of interviews that they've done. Are they intentionally engaging in regular dialogue about diversity?
Mm,
What does their C-suite look like? Because a lot of times you'll look at a company and they'll promote, all the colors of the rainbow, and then you look at their leadership board and it's
this is the
I was gonna say
story. Like,
it's something it's not as reflective of the website,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
So those are little things you can do research wise. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I think like this is such a telling one. And
Hmm.
like I'm in New Brunswick, right? And so many like board structures and leadership teams, when you go and look at the photos of the leadership teams, I will sometimes be like, does anybody else see what I see?
Yeah.
Because it's like the same, like not to pick on the middle-aged white dudes because, but it's all the same middle-aged white dude, like over and over and over. And sometimes you can look and the people even like look alike. Like there's just like physical character. So to your point, I think it's really, really telling when you look at organizations, particularly mature companies that have the resources to, right? Because in some markets, for sure, this is like a more challenging ask than others. But for mature organizations, and we know like that they have the resources and the ability to go out into the world and find that talent and bring it in, I would say for sure that's like a big red flag. Big red flag.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So and then also in the interview phase, I think asking questions
Yes.
is very important. So you could ask a question like, I see on your company's website that, you mentioned this as your diversity statement. What do you feel like has been the most impactful practice that you've witnessed? Right? Ask them about their specific experience and just see how they respond, on that. Are they able to provide you with a clear example? Does it seem like they're kind of like, searching for things to say? Things like that. One more thing I want to just mention is also just be clear about what it is that you're looking for. There are some people like they want to be in diverse spaces, but then there are some people like it's really not as, believe it or not, it's not as much as a priority. As long as they're clear about the space that they're working in, they know what they're walking into and they're like, okay, that's fine, I'll deal with it. I'm an in and out plan anyway, 3 years in, upskill, and then I'm out, right? So like, as long as you're clear about what it is that you're seeking, it makes it easier to, navigate even in the hiring process with a bit more strategy.
Yeah, it's such a good point too, because there are realities too, right? Where it's like in an ideal world, wouldn't it be great if we all had like the money and the resources to just only go work for a company that seems like really committed and aligned with our values? When, I mean, sometimes it's like, no, like rent's got to get paid, right? So we have to make choices that maybe aren't like the best for our mental health or progression, right? But to your point, if we have like an exit plan in mind, that can be hugely helpful to navigate something when it feels like, okay, this is not my jam. It doesn't feel like I'm welcome here. Having an exit plan and a strategy and doing things like working with a career coach to have that, kind of year-long plan could be hugely helpful for job seekers that find themselves in that tough spot.
Because I think I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, it's all yours.
No, I was just going to say, I think one of the things that, and everyone's different. I've worked with individuals, they like to come to a company and they'll be there 5 to 7 years, and then there are people who are like, you get me for 2, maybe 3 max, and then I'm out, right? But I think it is, I think that some of the disappointment that comes with just for everyone in certain working spaces is you come in hopeful that whatever investment that you give to the company, that they're going to return it. And you're expecting them to move you up. You're expecting them to, and they should, right? But also it's a numbers game. Sometimes they don't always have as many opportunities and everybody's competing to make more money, and sometimes it's just like, and I tell people this all the time, if you really want to see the boost in your financial income, you have to leave companies. The percentage of raises that we're getting nowadays are minimal, in my opinion. So it's just, again, like setting intentions with options, I think is what I'm talking about. So
yeah, that's so true. And to your point around like moving jobs and employers, I know we often have like, I find as employees almost like this false sense of loyalty. Like this is a transactional relationship, dude. Like,
and they'll lay us off in a heartbeat because we're a number when it comes to maintaining the status quo for the company. So
yeah, it's so true. I still remember this When I worked in corporate, this employee who left the company because he was feeling like undervalued and underpaid, went to another company for a very brief period of time, say 6 months, came back to the company I was at and received a 20% increase in salary. His skill was highly specialized and became undervalued inside the organization. But it's very, very true. Sometimes we have to leave and come back, which can be a tough call to make for a bunch of different reasons, right? Because the grass might not be greener, right?
Well, not only that, by them leaving, and I'm not saying if you want to get your company to give you a big boost, you quit and hope that they'll want you to come back. But by in that case, by them leaving, the company realized, well, if they want to come back, it's actually cheaper for us to just bring this person in instead of starting new. So that's
worked out for everyone, I suppose, especially the guy that 20% raise. When it comes to interviews, what steps can candidates take to like really effectively communicate their skills and qualifications and those strengths, and to make sure that they're fairly assessed during the interview?
Yeah. So I love to use this analogy that the interview is like a book, and you're the author. And what the interviewer controls is like what chapter you're reading to them, right? So chapter 1 may be, how did you get started? Chapter 4 may be, so what is some of your technical experience that you feel like has been the most impactful, right? So the reason why I use that analogy is very often people feel like the interview is a disempowering space. Like you have to pretend to be somebody that you're not. It's a test. You don't get the answer right, you're going to fail, da, 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 da. And so you just feel like you have no control, no power in the interview. And the reality is that you have all of it, believe it or not, right? You just don't necessarily know what questions that they're going to give you. And so preparing yourself in terms of being clear about what your story is, what your strengths are, the things that you value, the contributions, the accomplishments that you're the most proud of, allows you to walk in feeling like, you know what, I can do this. I have something to offer, and I'm going to tell them my story. And if it doesn't align with them, then most likely it wouldn't align with me once I got there, right? So kind of removing this energy of desperation in the interview process is good. So that's the mental and emotional part of it, right? Yeah. The more strategic, actionable part is practice. Practice is very important. Preparation yields confidence, because you feel like whatever is thrown at you, you'll be able to handle it because you prepared yourself. So practicing those behavioral-based questions, right? Practicing those sometimes considered challenging questions like, what is your weakness? Or how do you tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult person, right? Practicing those, having, I call it a bank of answers, right? And so, and it could be stories, right? But what it is like having different answers that you can pull from depending on the question they asked you. Yeah. And sometimes the question, you can use an answer for multiple types of questions, right? They ask you, how do you deal with a difficult person? Then they ask you, tell me about a time when you had to solve a challenge. That's kind of the same question.
Yep.
Right, yeah. In retrospect, right?
Yeah.
So just practicing that. You can work with a career coach, but you can also work with a friend, yeah, or a peer or a family member who's hired or is familiar with, interviewing. I used to record myself and go back and watch my answers and make notes about what are some of the things that I want to adjust in my answer, So preparation through practice is what helps you interview, and then also shifting your mindset about the amount of power you have in that situation as well.
I think that's like such good advice. And it's like, because we do, like, you're so right. Like, people just generally feel like powerless in this situation, but realistically there's a ton of stuff we can do to control and navigate. If people are jerks and they're judging or whatever, we can't control that, but we can control doing a good job in prepping with our questions. And I love the idea of recording yourself too, because it's like surprising to see, like, through that recording you can see like the moments where you're like struggling in your response or searching for the next part of the story or whatever, and then note it and go back and be like, okay, I really nailed this and this, but this piece of the story I could really benefit from adding some additional specifics or KPIs to it. I think that's really good advice.
Yeah. Something else that I'll ask people is, I'll say, where do you feel the most vulnerable in the interview process? So, and I'll be like, is it that you don't feel like your answers are concise enough? Is it that you kind of freeze when they throw something you don't expect, right? So kind of zeroing in on, because when you think about it, it may be just a couple of aspects of interviewing that makes you uncomfortable, but overall you feel okay with the process, right? So instead of hyper focusing on that issue and then making it the bane of the existence of the interview, just narrowing it down and saying, okay, I need to work on my timing.
Yeah.
Right. And again, that makes you feel like you're more in control of the situation than when you don't. So
yeah, and you know what? And it's like, and through the practice, I think, is how we can even like start to identify some of those places where we feel like, I feel vulnerable in this one because I don't have a strong answer or whatever. I think it all comes back to like your practicing bit of advice. It's so important. What do you do? Okay, this one, like, I feel like it's hard. So imagine we're in an interview situation, right? And we can feel, I've been here before, you probably have too, like you can feel like the bias coming through in the interviewer. I won't forget, I had one particularly, I could see the interviewer kind of poking at the fact that I had kids, and like I could like feel like his concern that like, oh gosh, is she gonna be committed because she has, like, I could feel it in the air. What do you do in that situation? Like, what would you counsel someone to do?
So I think, again, this goes back to, what are your expectations for the job, right? So like if you are walking in and you're like, I think I can navigate microaggression and bias, even though me personally, I feel like nobody should, but we don't always have a choice, right? We don't always have, sometimes we got to take that job, right? So if you're clear about what your expectation is, then you can figure out what am I going to do in this scenario. So like, for instance, if I'll give you an example. So I was interviewing, and I saw their website, and it was an organization that promoted like women, women-led, so on and so forth. But it was very, very much lacking in diversity, racial and ethnic diversity. And so they asked me what I felt how the company could improve. And I said that.
Yeah.
Needless to say, I didn't get to the next round, but I didn't feel any type of way about it, because that was something to me that I was like, if I don't get this job, I'm okay, because I don't feel like I would feel comfortable in this space, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that. So you may not be able to do anything in the moment if you're feeling the bias. What you do is you go home and you evaluate, okay, is this a space I want to be in? Can I afford to pass on this if I were to be given an offer? So you just kind of have a plan, about what would happen. Generally, I find though that when those situations come up, I find that generally people don't end up having to make that tough decision. It just kind of it kind of works out for the betterment,
Mm-hmm.
but I just assessing the interview after it's done and figuring out if it was trusting your intuition. I think a lot of times, especially for women, we struggle with that.
Mm-hmm.
Trusting that that what we're feeling is going to put us in the right direction, So I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, you definitely did. Yeah, I feel like too, it's just like I've experienced it myself in interviews, but I've watched hiring managers, like being on the interviewing side of the table. I've watched hiring managers or like project those biases onto candidates like more times than I even like. It's troubling the amount of times I've seen that happen, like in just like a variety of different ways. And I think you're right. Like we can't do much about this except for manage our mindset. In an ideal world, like I know people are like, but like human rights and that's not fair. So what are, like, if you play it out, like what are you actually going to do about it? Like file a human rights complaint, tell the person that they're not being fair? Do you think you're going to get hired anyway? Like it's to your point, it's like, what do I actually want to achieve from the situation to get a job?
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
there's not much as a candidate we can do there except for frame our mindset around it, really.
Right, because there's a system there that's set
Mm-hmm.
up, that's been established, and and the powers that be have the ability to make a change, but if they're actively choosing not to, what difference are you going to make as an external candidate? It's different when you work for a company and maybe they are giving you a space to voice and you want to be actionable in that. Okay, then you can have a strategic plan maybe. But as a candidate, you got to think about what's the best use of my time and my energy.
Yep. Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. And if that's not going to serve you in your goal, like let's not even go down that path, really.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of best interview tips, what would your kind of like top 2 tips be for candidates to effectively navigate job interviews?
Yeah. So I would say I'll add a couple more, but I'm going to repeat what I said before in terms of just practicing and preparedness is important. Doing research outside of so you can have the best answer, but also having research in terms of what are the experience that people are having working at that company. And there's spaces, Glassdoor used to be a good space. It's not bad, but even Reddit sometimes has, threads of people who work there. It's anonymous and you can kind of get an idea. Within the interview, I think I'll tell you the 3 pieces of advice that I always tell people. Number 1, take your time before you start answering your question. People rush into their answers. And what happens is they tend to stumble midway through, right? Or they ramble because they didn't take a moment to organize their thoughts. And so they're like, oh, okay, I got to overcompensate because I didn't say enough, right? And then the next thing you know, you're talking for 5 minutes.
Yep.
So if you just take 5 to 10 seconds, and I know that can seem like an eternity, you can even say, let me think about this. And then you do that and you think about, okay, what are they asking me? Okay, all right, I need to use this answer. This will be the best answer for me to use, right? That I practiced, right? So giving yourself that time. The other piece of advice that I give is if you find that you stumble, just keep going. Not necessarily like ramble, but I'm saying don't freeze up in the moment and panic. Just keep talking your way through your points that you want to make, right? Because the interviewing process is a very human process. The person who is interviewing you has been in your shoes, right? So hopefully they're going to show you some grace, that you're going to be a little bit nervous, that you're having to talk to people you've never met before, right? So just allow yourself to be human but don't give up in the moment and just abandon at all costs. Like keep talking. And I think the last point I would say is, let me think about this. What's the third piece of advice today? Do your best to organize your answers, especially in those questions that are non-behavioral, like very open-ended. So for instance, if you asked me, what do you think is, why do you want to work for this company, right? I would say have a target number of points that you want to make, right? Mm-hmm. Like the STAR method is a point system. It's 4 points: situation, task, action, result, right? Yeah. So you can create points for questions that are not necessarily behavioral based. So if you ask me, why do you want to work here? I could say, okay, I'm going to give 3 reasons why. Yeah. One's going to be personal connection. The other one's going to be the team. The third one's going to be the company, right? But just organizing your thoughts so you have a target that you're hitting, instead of just grabbing things as they come to you and not having any structure. Having an organized answer helps the interviewer to remember what you said. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If it's not organized, it's going to be very hard for them to have something that they can record, right? That they can keep track of, so that when they go back to assess how you did, right? So you have to think about that. So those are my 3 to 5 tips.
I don't know. It was so weird. We just should have started with, these are my star tips for interview. No, I think that's a great point. Especially, it can be overwhelming. And that's, I think, when people. Oh, did I just activate a thumbs up there for myself? It can be really overwhelming for people to navigate those big open-ended questions. And I think, to your point, like really grounding yourselves, but with that, having a certain amount of points or whatever can be really, really helpful, like for our confidence. And not only that, but to really put a strong case forward as to why we're a good candidate. So how can people keep in touch with you and follow up to today's live?
Absolutely. So I would say, check out my website. It's literally my first and my last name.com, ZeinabKahera.com. I would say LinkedIn is a great space to follow me. I'm pretty engaged on LinkedIn. So it's LinkedIn.com, the / the IN, and then Zeinaib Kahera. I keep it really simple. I also have an Instagram page, ZK Careers. You can check that out. And I have a periodic podcast, meaning that I'm an entrepreneur, and so I have other things that I have to do, but I also like to have occasional conversations. It's called These Fertile Grounds, and I created it because it's really for my clients. Like, I want to give them a space, there we go, where they can hear from other people's stories, particularly women of color, how they navigate their career. Not everybody has gotten to their goal, their final professional target. And so it's women who are in the middle. They're still figuring it out. So definitely check that out. You can access it on my website as well.
Awesome. So, and we'll link as well to all of these items in the description. So if you are looking to keep in touch with Zeinaib, that's going to be easy to do because everything will be listed right there. So click those links. This is the end of our show for today. I want to encourage you as well to check out hirediverse.ca. It's a job board specifically designed for diverse job seekers to connect employers who value diversity and inclusion with diverse job seekers. So check that out. It'll be linked also, hirediverse.ca. Zeinaib, thanks so much for chatting with us this morning and for the amazing interview tips. And good luck to everyone on their job search. We'll see you here next week, Diverse Voices. It'll be Tuesday at 10 o'clock Atlantic time. We'll see you then. Thank you.
Thank you.